Good morning, gentlemen, and welcome to next year's development discourse. Our development discourse is used for purposes of highlighting critical development challenges facing the country. The last one we dealt was on issues of mercenary in Africa and how that impacts on the execution of the conflict in the Northeast. Today, we're looking at protecting the petroleum pipeline and oil and gas assets in the Niger Delta region. According to available statistics that we have, Nigeria has lost close to about $3.5 billion in revenue to crude oil theft. This amounts to about 10% of our country's foreign reserve. In 2019, an NBC reported that we've lost close to about $159 billion to oil theft and pipeline vandalism. Again, this represents, in most cases, significant amount of resources that will have gone into investment in other sectors of the country. Of recent, we have had data and statistics suggesting that 95% of Nigerian production are stolen by this group of people. In other words, we lose close to 95% of our production to oil thieves. The question is, how did we get here? How did we allow this to happen? How can we not be able to account and protect our strategic resources? How is it that we have institutions that are responsible for this unable to perform? Oil theft poses an existential threat to the nation. It erodes our revenue base, it undermines national security, it stunts growth in the sector and stimulates investment in the industry. It destroys our environment and our biodiversity as far as the Niger Delta region is concerned. And above all, it militates against the country's ability to meet its production quota given to it by OPEC, and at the same time meet its contractual obligation to suppliers. How can we exit from this nightmare? It becomes an albatross. It becomes a huge development challenge for the country. And it is very saddening that this has continued and no effort has been made significantly to curtail this menace. Discussing this subject with me and trying to find solutions are three gentlemen that have worked in the sector and people with development background and experiences to deal with some of these issues. And I'm going to let these gentlemen introduce themselves, but before then, let me just lay out the rules. Various views can be expressed. Those views are based on individual experiences and understanding of some of the issues that are taking place. At no point does those views reflect the institutions they are associated with or currently work with. It has nothing to do with the institutional opinion and views they represent. On the contrary, it is their individual opinion and understanding of what the challenging issues are. Having said the rules, I would like to introduce the gentlemen. They will each take 5 minutes to introduce themselves and make an opening statement regarding this. Then we'll move into a more interactive session of question and answers. I would like to start with Joe Mwakwe. Joe, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, Charles. Good morning to
Is
my
Joe
fellow
there?
panelists. Yes, can you hear me? Good morning, can you hear me?
Joe, you have 5 minutes to introduce yourself and your background, and then give us an opening statement on the subject we are discussing.
Okay, thank you, Charles. As you rightly pointed, my name is Joe. Joe Wakwe is my name. I have an upstream background. I'm an engineer. 20 years in the upstream, and then I spent about 3 years in the policy side of things, working for government, and I'm into private consultancy right now. I co-run an advisory firm called Zira. We're based out of Lagos. I will start by saying that the issue of oil theft is not new. It's been here with us for a while. And it's gone worse due to the response of the state to these challenges. What it really means, so there are two things here. When crude is produced, you put it in the pipeline, it goes from the wellhead into the pipeline, from the pipeline to a flow station, it is processed from there, it is sent by pipeline again to a terminal, an export terminal, before it's loaded onto a boat. Along this line, we've seen over time increasing amount of losses. And the typical response, so when you lose it, it ends up in the environment, one word, the other is either it's spilled or it is used. But the real issue is, so there's the issue of loss and there's the issue of deferment when you shut it in, which is what has happened today. If you look at our production last year, we averaged 1.6 thereabout. This year, we are averaging less than 1.2 in the last 4 months that we've seen numbers. So clearly, there's a lot of deferment going on. Companies are shutting in because they can no longer guarantee that what they put in, they can get out. Now, what has that done? It means that you have an idle economic capacity shutting of close to 700,000 barrels of oil per day. That is huge. The other thing is, in discussing this, I think we need to look at the losses, the nature of these losses. So we have losses like I described from the wellhead anywhere up onto the terminal. Any loss that happens there, we call it point of origin loss. Now, when it happens, when there's a loss from the terminal into the ship, that's an export loss. But beyond all of this, so that's as regards crude. But there's another big issue. Even products, we're losing products as well. So the integrity of our pipeline systems is in serious doubt. So I think I will just leave it. I'll explain a bit more. So why has this happened? The key issue here is that the state is absent. The Nigerian state has receded so much that is totally absent. So the maintenance of law and order is something that should bother each and every one of us. The other observation is that obviously theft of this scale cannot go on without complicity by the society at large. I mean, the host communities know what's going on and nobody is saying anything about it. So there's significant complicity from the host, from the society at large. And of course, our processes, we need to look at our processes. They are less than transparent. Whether it's reporting, whether it's how things are done, we need to worry about transparency in the sector. So what can we do? My sense is that three things needs to happen for this to be taken care of. One is that there needs to be engagement with the host communities particularly, and I hope the PIB and the framework that has been put into it to address host community discontent is implemented wholly. That will help to bring them on board. The other thing is that we need some boots on the ground. There's no question about it. I hold the view that there's equally complicity as far as security agencies are concerned. Look at what happened in Imo State some days ago. That will tell you there's no way an operation that size and that scale will be going on without state agencies being involved. And the last one is that there is opportunity to use technology here whether it's satellite-based, whether it's fingerprinting of the crude, it needs to happen. We need to apply technology. We need far better metering standards than we currently have. And lastly, there needs to be some level of international collaboration. This is not a uniquely Nigerian problem. It's happening everywhere. It happened in Indonesia, it's happened so there has to be some global collaboration to address it. Similar to what we did for diamond. The Kimberley process is there, where diamonds are marked. You have blood diamond and all that. I think we need to start looking at rallying around the international community around, because the crude that is stolen, I tell you, the scale of what is being stolen is not just refined locally. The artisanal refineries are not the ones doing all that. There's a trade, a global trade in stolen crude. And the earlier somebody rallies the international community to come up with a process that will address that, the better for oil producing nations. I think I'll stop at this point and I'll shed more light as we go through.
Okay, Joe, thank you very much. I would like Sam to come in now, if Sam is online.
Elsewhere, closing down the Russian pipelines. So there's been a number of outreach attempts here in Nigeria as well to see whether that could materialize. But obviously, we're quite concerned about the current situation in the Niger Delta and whether Nigeria can sustain a steady flow of oil and gas to Europe. So I guess that's why we've been interested in the Niger Delta, but it's also worth mentioning that we've actually been active in the region since 2008, quite heavily with development programs. We don't see, a military security solution to the problem. Really, it has to come from the on-land root causes sort of angle, in our opinion. But we do have let's call it a comprehensive approach to how we want to address or how we would like to see the issues addressed in the region. So I think I'll just leave it at that, which is a brief explainer why I'm here and the interests from the European Union on this. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Thomas. While we're waiting for Sam, Joe, don't be flummoxed if I get back to you again. My question is very simple. If you are a potential investor in Nigeria, will you invest within the context of what is happening?
Obviously, the answer is no. And there are many ways to look at it. One is when you lose significant volumes, as we're doing, your unit cost of production goes up. Remember, your cost is your cost. You're going to tell, so the fixed cost of your operation will not go away, right? So your unit cost, what we call the technical unit cost, will increase, and that essentially means that you become less and less profitable, right? So that's one, and that gets very complicated if you borrowed money, right? Because you have a payment schedule that you have to meet. So imagine the guys who did the acquisitions, whether it's Shell acquisition or all that, they took money from the banks to do that, and they will be held to a repayment schedule, and the volumes are no longer there to support that repayment schedule. So these are serious issues that needs to be addressed. I do not think that if they saw tomorrow, they would have put their money in these businesses. So it's not a very simple issue. It's very complicated, and it has far-reaching implications for both investors and the government. The government also, government take declines rapidly as your unit cost goes up. So it's a double whammy for both the investment community and for the government. I think we need to fix it. We need to be able to, because the underpinning the PIA, and I always say this, the assumptions in the PIA is that we're going to attract investment. That's why we reduced our royalty rates, we reduced tax rates to attract investment. And on one hand, this crude theft thing is sending the wrong signal to the market that this indeed is not a safe place to invest. So it's something that we need to address. Otherwise, we will not see the gains of the PIA. I'm very clear on that. If we don't deal with this issue, we can as well just forget it, because the PIA, the whole concept is that we are going to fix host community issues, get a competitive fiscal arrangement, put governance in place to ensure that investors do come in. And if investors are not certain that they will take their money out, pay their debts, they will not come here.
Okay, Joe, you highlighted, a huge number of issues that are very, very significant. And I was listening when you mentioned about technology, and I've seen what Saudi Arabia Aramco has done. What is holding Nigeria from deploying the essential technology that is required to monitor pipeline, track oil movement, and ensure we get the necessary benefit from this sector?
Well, it's one word: political will. I think that the leaders of the industry needs to wake up to the challenge that this presents. There's no way. It's going to require some investment, but I tell you, the benefits far outweigh the costs. Because today, just look at simple numbers. A year ago, we were doing 1.7, 1.6. We were struggling to get back to the pre-COVID 1.8. That was the target, right? Yes. Now we are doing 1.15, 1.2. So you've shaved off 600, 700,000 barrels of oil per day. That is huge. And we need to be clear on this. We have two streams of crude in Nigeria. We have the deep water, the PSCs, and we have the onshore, mostly the concession, what we call the royalty tax area. The bulk of this challenge is in the onshore and shallow water, right? Which is the concession area. What that means is that the deep water, which is high cost by definition, we are essentially producing the higher cost production, which means that even if we grow volumes and they are all in the deep water, our margins are thinning by the day. We are getting less and less profitable. The lowest cost production in Nigeria today is onshore shallow water, which is where this challenge is. So our mix, our production mix at all times, you will wish that we will produce more of the onshore shallow water crudes, because that gives you more per barrel, your take is higher. But now it's swinging to deep offshore. So we're producing more of the deep offshore. It means that our total net take, government take, is going down every day. So we are becoming less and less profitable.
That's interesting. Now, let me take on Thomas. Thomas, you did mention about, with the ongoing Ukraine war and an evident shift by Europe in exploring other sources of oil and gas supply. And Nigeria is one of the areas being considered. And within the framework of how we need to guard our maritime security sector, how do you see, what do you suggest and see as possible response or strategy that can be put in place to ensure that at least there is transparency, there is security in the externalization of the oil and the crude resources we ship abroad? Because basically, Joe did mention that it will require a concerted global effort in addressing this particular issue. From the European Union perspective, or from your experience, how do you see this working?
Yeah, I think it's a key question and very interesting. I'm afraid I don't have the answer per se, but I think that the larger trend that Joe also is pointing towards is that you've seen the onshore production becoming more and more Nigerian, I guess, is one way to put it, right? That it used to be dominated by a lot of international players, and more it's becoming Nigerian actors who are in charge of the onshore production. And I think that's a very legit action nevertheless, I think it also points to the fact that the onshore production element is becoming more and more difficult for the international players. So they are resorting to staying deep offshore because it's more secure. So while the net intake, as Joe is alluding to, is slimmer, it is at the end of the day the safer option. And I also struggle to understand why it's not why we're not able to secure the pipelines onshore through the Saudi Arabian model, or whatever you want to use as a term. I frankly don't have an answer for you why it's not the case at this stage. But I can say that securing the deep offshore platforms has become a lot easier over the years. It used to be an issue if we go back some 5-6 years with repeated attacks on the platforms. Today, it's become a very secure environment, not least thanks to a lot of the private security escort companies that operate off the Niger Delta. These are typically private companies, but with Nigerian Navy personnel on board, and they help secure that environment out there. So I think that's also why we repeatedly have seen a trend towards deep offshore piracy from many of the groups in the Niger Delta, but maybe we can get into that a bit later. So yeah, I don't know. That was a bit of a vague answer, but nevertheless, what I have to say. Thanks.
Okay, as a follow-up, there is this report I read somewhere where they said the drop in sea piracy, it's actually associated with increasing spike in oil theft in the country. In other words, so long as the oil theft is going on, pirates tend to shift their focus on that aspect. Is that what some of you are beginning to find out?
Yeah, so exactly. The Gulf of Guinea is known as the global hotspot of piracy. It's not the Horn of Africa anymore. In 2020, there were about 140 kidnappings of international seafarers. That's really, I mean, when we talk about piracy and maritime security, that's one of the key factors to look at is the kidnap for ransom trend. And that was very high in 2020. In 2021, we saw a very significant downtrend, almost 50%, and that has continued to 2022. We've only seen 3 piracy cases over this year, so that's a very significant drop. And I think a lot of analysts and different security experts have been asking, why is that the case? I think there's a mix to the answer, obviously. It's maybe the bit boring, comprehensive answer, but we've seen a larger presence of naval assets in the region. There's been 5 European naval assets operating in the region from Denmark, France, Italy, Spain, and Portugal. So there's been a continuous presence of gray vessels, as we call it. The Nigerian Navy and NIMASA have also ramped up their activities at sea. We do have new legislation in place, the SPOMO Act, which convicted 10 pirates in last year. So there's a number of factors, but I do agree that the key factor for me is not found at sea, but on land. And I think it begs the question, what is happening in the Niger Delta that is causing this downtrend on piracy? And why do I focus so much on the Niger Delta here? I think it's quite well known at this stage that many of the pirate groups operating in the Gulf of Guinea, they emanate from the Niger Delta. The UNODC released a report last year pinpointing that it's about 4 to 6 pirate groups that are based around Bayelsa rivers and Delta. It's a maximum 250 persons involved in the operation. So there's a lot of evidence that points to the fact that they come from this region. Obviously, there are other countries in the Gulf of Guinea that also have piracy, but I would say the bulk of the actors come from this region. And with the current trend on oil bunkering and theft, that might be one of the reasons that they have shifted their operations to that. And that would also follow a larger trend we've seen over the last 10 years, actually, that we've seen many stages to maritime insecurity in the region. With militancy, petropiracy, this trend of piracy and kidnapping offshore, now going back to the Niger Delta on land factors with oil bunkering and theft again. So I think it's also important to emphasize that while we quell maybe one security trend, another one is able to pop up. So I don't see piracy as maybe having gone away completely. We might see it emerge again over the next couple of years. So it's very important that we don't have this militaristic and security approach to dealing with the problems, because then you get what we call a ballooning effect, where we quell one thing, but something else pops up. And that's sort of been the trend with the Niger Delta for many years, I think, is this militaristic approach and not addressing the root causes, really. So very long, convoluted answer, but I hope that was enough.
Okay, thanks a lot. I think Sam Otobeze is seen. Sam, are you there?
Yes, good morning, everyone.
Yeah, Sam, welcome. We've started the process. I'm sure you're having problem logging in, and now you've logged in, that's fine. But for the viewers, there are a lot of questions coming up from the viewers. We are making this as much interactive as possible. While I ask some of the questions, there are other questions that may come up from the viewers that are very pertinent. I might just throw them out if they are directed to a particular individual. Sam, now you're on board. We've looked at some of the issues that is currently driving oil theft and pipeline vandalism, and the cost and the implication it has for the government, for our national security, and in terms of our obligations to meet our production quota and contractual commitments to suppliers. Now, Joe has taken us through a whole lot of issues, and so Thomas has done. I would like to give you 5 minutes to basically introduce yourself and what you do, and then make an opening statement just like the others. Then we'll take it up from there. Over to you, Sam.
Okay, colleagues and viewers. My name is Sam Otobeze. I'm a CPP. I was the immediate past General Manager Security for NNPC, and before then I was responsible for security operations for Lagos and Abuja in ExxonMobil. I had my good time with the intelligence department of security in Nigeria before moving on. I practice law, I practice security. I joined the two because they are like siamese twins. I'm currently managing our outfit, Abacus Integrated Security. I'm the MD, and is a consulting firm for oil and gas and other general security in the country. Basically, that's my background. I want to thank the organizers for bringing up this topic, because as a practitioner, I am worried, because by 2015, when I was moved to manage security in NNPC, production line was about 800,000 barrels per day. It was a very big concern. And, you know, with the then minister, who was also the GMD, he pulled me out of Mobile to see if something could be done differently. And with his commitment and what we were coming on board, we dragged it to 2016, and we started making gains. So if we can go back to record and see what it was by 2015, September stroke early part of 2016, around 800 and something barrels per day. And by the time I exited in March 2020, we were averaging 2.1 million barrels per day. And then just a year after, 2021, it started plummeting. And as of today, is dangling between 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 million barrels per day. It's a huge concern because, as we know, oil and gas account for 89% of our national income earning. And if we continue to go down this way, I'm becoming more and more afraid of what's going to happen in the next 2-3 years if something drastic is not done. So it's a huge concern for everybody who is looking at the economy, looking at the security situation, and looking at the incremental growth of population. Something is constant. Growth in the population is very constant. There's constant or geometrical growth in population of Nigeria. But there is arithmetical progression in the growth of resources to take care of this population. It will not be a surprise to see the astronomical growth in security issues. I know we're a prayerful nation, but I'm just wondering how God is going to solve this. Because practically, we are not balancing. We are tailing down. We can't hold the population down. The resources to take care of people be generated, we don't have the solution. Certainly, prayer may not give food to all the hungry boys and girls, whose footprint continue to increase in the streets of Nigeria. Is there a huge concern for today? Yes, but there is a greater concern for tomorrow. And this is why I think this discussion is very, very important. But again, we need to know that security discussion, there's a limitation to which we can share. And that is why we do consultancy services. So sometimes it may not be that we don't know what to say, but we're saying what we may have to manage, because we wouldn't want to create more problems trying to solve the existing ones. We don't want to, create more tension in the society by what we say. But when it is one-on-one, then we can open up and say, look at this, and look at this. At this point, I think I'm done with my opening statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sam. You are not on video. I wish you switched on your video so that we can see your face. But at the same time, I would like to take you up on something that is very, okay, thank you. That is very, very pertinent on this discussion. Now, when Joe opened up, he raised up a whole lot of other things. You worked in an NPC before and at the GM security. Do you think the currently existing approach is a very obvious answer, but do you think that the currently existing approach in terms of pipeline protection of oil and gas assets is effective? Taking into consideration some of the early work I knew that was done in terms of how to involve community, thank God that the PIA noticed that, and in terms of how to deploy security. I think there are 3 levels of deployment that your office suggested at one point in time. How effective and where are we now in terms of that? Any idea? Sam, are you there? Sam, are you hearing me?
I think he's muted.
Is he muted?
Yes.
Sam, unmute so that you can hear me. Sam, unmute so that we can hear you.
Okay, I couldn't hear you at all. Part of the security challenges, okay. Cyber security challenge. I'm not hearing it from here.
Okay, let me repeat my question. The PIA provides in Chapter 3 that host communities implicitly will be held responsible for any compromise or vandalization of pipelines. I think, and they will actually forfeit the contribution that will be made to them, to their trust fund. In other words, it is saying that the host community will take responsibility in that area. I do remember that there's some work that has been done in terms of how to involve the host community and how to deploy technology. What is your view in terms of how that should work? I know you're shaking your head.
Charles, you know, it's easier to make a law than to apply the law.
Okay.
You see, you can make a law that will be enforceable when you address the issues, the factors surrounding the implementers. You can't approbate and reprobate. Making a law that nobody should steal in the midst of hungry people, you just need to get some, you know, guns around so that you kill all of them. Because when hunger comes, there will be breach of that rule. Nobody is going to comply because of survival instinct in every man. Very sound provision, but I remember the enormous work that you saw from the beginning. When we developed the concept of security, you know, community engagement strategy and plan to ensure that the security of pipeline will remain forever. I made a presentation to all the stakeholders before engaging the ministry to seek their buy-in, to get their criticisms. If we engage the community, you know, proactively, and let them be part and parcel of what's happening, and eliminate that gap of you versus them, things will be improved. And by the time I made presentation round and bought their support, I had to come to the ministry from where you now came for presentation. And from where you took it to European Union. And when they came for presentation, you were there and you saw how, you know, they bought into it and even funded part of the research.
Sam, we lost you.
Funded remain implementation. Instead of implementing it, I was yanked off the system. I'm not sure where you guys are in the system. If you don't know it, you don't know it. So that has not been implemented. You can't hold.
Okay, Sam, we've lost Sam somehow.
Somebody responsible,
okay,
for a thing that is not part of. You need to engage them actively. Then they take liability. You see, like certain taxes are paid. Does it percolate down to those through whose communities these pipelines go? Does it percolate down to those who are expected to bring in their own support to protect the oil and gas company? I'm not sure it does. But if we don't go by way of community-based security engagement process, that law may never see the light of day by way of implementation. I'm not being a prophet of doom, but if it cannot work, it cannot work. I don't see it working until we address the issues concerning those who are supposed to be stakeholders or who are stakeholders in the protection of the pipelines. So good legislation, but implementation will be challenged. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I remember for purposes of clarification, I remember that there are 3 levels that were actually defined or prescribed. One was community participation in pipeline protection that the EU came in to support within the context of its development agenda, because it is tied to community policing and community-based participation in issues that concerns the community. Secondly, is the deployment of technology around the line of what Aramco in Saudi Arabia has done. Thirdly, it's the issue of law enforcement having in place a law enforcement capability that can respond to some of those issues. I think 3 levels were outlined and proposed. What I am wondering, and I think it's something I think, Joe, you may take into and explain, or probably make some prognosis around it. Why has it been difficult, very, very difficult, for an NPC or those managing our oil sector to basically go all out to do this? Several visits have been made to Aramco in Saudi Arabia by all the people heading an NPC. Yet, some of these best practices, we found them very difficult to get deployed. What is going on? Joe, you are pondering over that.
Okay, well, we have Sam here. He's an NNPC man. He can tell us. But I think the issue really is you have to think about capacity, and capacity in this sense. I'm thinking financial and technical. So whatever you do, let's recognize that the JV, which is the area of concern here, has been grossly underfunded in the last 15 to 20 years, right? That's the same area. So yes, we have all these plans on what can be done, but you cannot do it if you are perpetually in a net negative position financially, because all of this, so whether it's metering, modern metering systems, whether it's modern technology that can track, that you can use for pipeline surveillance, whatever it is you want to do, it has to be funded. But this is an area where we are piling up cash costs as we speak, right? So the point I make is, we need to take an overall picture. The JV is poorly funded. It just happens to be the area that gives us our lowest cost oil, right? But we haven't even paid attention to it. So that would suggest, in some sense, that we need to look at the entire thing. I mean, there has been agitation. People over the years, we've talked about incorporating the JV. That way we can free up the balance sheet so that it can be self-funding. There are a lot of things that can be done. I think the tragedy of the Nigerian situation is that there's no part of our life that is properly funded. So all of this, we have plans. I mean, that's not the issue here. There is nothing, there's no challenge we have today as a nation that we do not have a plan that can work. The problem is, how will you fund the plan? So all of these satellite things, I mean, there are fingerprinting, we can do, they can be done, but somebody has to put the money down. And I don't see that NNPC has the money to do any, because they are owing their partners. They are not able to fund year on year the activities in the minimal level of activity. Remember, one of the reasons we have exit, one of the reasons we have companies working out of Nigeria is the difficulty. But beyond the difficulty, the companies they were in Colombia. They've been in areas where in fact, the oil industry will operate even if there's war, right? During the war, business was going on. The challenge is your partner must put his money down. One of the biggest frustrations I sense with the IOCs is that they have assets that they would like to produce, develop and produce, but their partner is broke. And for as long as their partner is unable to bring that money, they are looking at the assets and the opportunities are going away. And they ask themselves, what are we doing here? So we need to look at the structure, this whole idea of state participation. And I've raised, you remember when we were writing the book 3 years ago, I kept hammering on this issue of, as a policy, should the Nigerian state continue to hold on to this asset and say we are participating as an investor? Because investors in the JV, you are required to bring your money. That is a major challenge to funding activities in the JV. And until we address it either through the IJV mechanism or we sell out our equity, we will continue to face this challenge. So there are solutions, but they require money, and we don't have the money.
Joe, we don't have the money, but people are stealing a lot.
I can't help you. I don't know what to say to that. I can only tell you that if you look at what we are doing, Charles, let's think about it. In the last couple of years, look at all the investments NNPC is making. For every dollar they are spending, they are borrowing it. AKK, refinery upgrade, everything, every spade on the ground is with borrowed funds. Does that sound like an organization that has a balance sheet that can do anything? I don't understand it. So we need to look at what we have created. We created that entity. So the Nigerian state sweeps away every dime that comes into the system, right? And then the governors will share it and run away. That is hardly the way to set up a business. So every month they go, whatever comes in, they share it. That organization has no balance sheet that they can do anything with. I don't know how hard we'll say this before people will understand it. So we sit down and deceive ourselves that things will change. No. We created a body that can hardly, so the GMD is trying to create this big organization, and so it has to go to African development to secure $5 billion funding, right? Loan. Heck, it's not gonna, this is not how it works. That organization needs to build a balance sheet, right? To be able to do basic things. So I struggle. I just think that we missed the opportunity. I remember telling you that one of my biggest frustration with the PIA that ended with what we ended up with, we kept pressing to get the NNPC unbundled. I remember having that. I said, if we do not unbundle it and free them up from this state thing, we're going to be having these challenges. And our partners, whether it's Nigerian or IOCs, they want you to put your 55 or 60% on the table before they can go and do anything. But you continue to owe them, and you expect that things will work well. The resources today, if you look at our remaining resource, the bulk of it is in this very area, the JV. And that is where we don't have, look at the PACs, the companies are free to fund PACs 100%. We don't have stories to tell, right? There is no problem in the PACs because the companies are free by the contractual arrangement to fund it 100%. And they are doing it happily. So where this bottleneck is in the JV. And that is because we have this big brother sitting down who is broke.
Okay, the big brother is broke, which is the government.
Well, the government and its agents.
And its agencies. Interestingly, there are some statistics going around, 4 billion on subsidy. 4 billion on subsidy. And if you look at it, that basically amounts to our total corporate income tax and VAT added together, which means basically what we collect, we spend on the subsidy. Now, somebody sent a question, say, why not use the resources in subsidy and deploy the necessary technology that is essential in ensuring that oil and gas pipelines and assets are protected, and ensuring as well that we derive much value from our oil. Somebody just put up that question. I was asking why. Why can't we do that? Is this something Joe and Sam can take on? Joe, you seem to know more on this area, on that side. I will take on Sam on the issues of the actors that are involved in this theft, based on his field work.
So your question is, why don't we use the money for subsidies to secure pipeline, the crude evacuation infrastructure? I mean, should we even be doing the subsidy in the first place? My view all the time is that that is a wasteful spend. And I just can't justify it. I can't think of a station that I can reasonably justify the subsidy spent. But it is what it is. If Nigerians want to continue to do that, they are welcome to it. Can we find resources to secure the infra? I think we can if we looked hard enough. We can. I think it's, again, we need to have a leadership that says we need to fix this problem. So when we get that, when we have somebody that says, okay, enough is enough, we need to address this. Like I said, there are 3 layers to this. There is the bit, remember in 2017, February, March, our numbers came down. We are in a similar situation output-wise. It took somebody touring the Niger Delta state. I don't know if anybody remembers.
Yeah.
Charles, you were involved in that. So, and you saw the volumes climbing up again after that intervention. So we need somebody. So he just talks about leadership. We need some leadership that can say, well, we need to fix this. And I think beyond the technology, the high cost technology and all those things, there are very basic things that can be done that can at least buy us some time. That's my sense. I mean, I don't imagine that this thing is being done in isolation. I think that there is some connivance, if not complicity, by some parties that if you sit down with them and have a one-on-one, you might be able to get some space. But it's important that something is done quickly.
Okay, Sam, on the basis of your engagement and interaction as the GM security, what do you think is the profile of some of the people that are involved in this theft? Some people say they're the youths in the region. Well, the question is, does the capacity exist actually for them to refine the volume of what we are looking at, apart from some of the damages that are caused? There must be a broad array of people that are involved, because it makes sense if we can identify this group of people. It will help on how we can begin to formulate strategy to combating this menace. I didn't say you should mention names, but just basically.
Sorry, Charles. I know you're not going to expect a direct answer from me on this. You know that this is a very sensitive thing. I'm
not interrupting you. A question came. Somebody sent the question here. So can we give? Yeah.
Yes, certainly you know that for us to handle, because there is a period that can be compared when it was bad, when it got better, and when it's now going bad. You know that there are characters that are around this, and I don't want to be unfair, because in the principle of naming items, the one not named is deemed to have been excluded. That's a principle of law. If I come and tell you George Niger Delta militant, I'm being unfair because are they the only ones? No. You want me to tell? You see, there are things you wouldn't expect me to say on this platform, but I can tell you that the stakeholders are involved. So whatever you make up as stakeholders, that become those who are involved. Okay. If we engage on other this thing, then we can talk more. Thanks. Okay.
That's
please,
fine.
Charles, if you can help me, I'm running short of time for a very crucial program for me. Please, if there are other questions, let me take in the next 5-10 minutes so that I don't shoot
I'll do
myself
that.
on the
I'll do
foot.
that. I want to get to Thomas. Maybe once Thomas has done that, then we'll come and give you your closing listing so that you can go. Thomas, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. The chapter 3 of the PIA, I'm sure you've not read it. You maybe something you may have to take a look at, but I'll give you an idea. It's a Petroleum Industry Act that was passed. The chapter 3 dealt mostly with host community issues. It provides for setting up host community trust fund that will address issues that has to do with the development of the host communities, and the appointment of board of trustees, appointment of committees that will manage the process, the structure that will drive it. It laid out all sorts of things and said about 2.5%, if I'm correct, of the previously operating expenditure of the of the lessee and the operators will basically be used to fund some of these activities. Now, what the critical thing here is, it says, once a pipeline in that particular community is destroyed or compromised, then they forfeit those development funding. And the implication is that it has made the people responsible for pipeline protections. There hasn't been any standard in terms of how that should happen. So, Thomas, what I'm saying is, given that this provision is there, and the communities are likely to be responsible for pipeline protection. In other words, it will involve some element of a structure on the part of the communities on how they do policing of those pipelines. Is it something you think, from the European Union perspective and from the work you do, that helping communities or helping government or helping those structures to say these are the standardized approach on how this can be done? Because if left that way, if left in the vacuum, every community will do their own module. Is this something that the European Union can come in to say we can help and support in standardizing the module, working in partnership with the government and working in partnership with the oil companies?
Yeah, thanks, Charles. I think that's really a relevant question. I think let me just start off by saying that I think it's a very tricky part of the PIA, that specific chapter, because you do, at the end of the day, put the responsibility on the communities themselves, and sometimes it's not the perpetration or the acts of vandalism might not be perpetrated by the communities themselves. I think we all know there's a lot of illicit actors in the Niger Delta, ranging from militants to pirate groups to cult groups to many bad apples in the region, obviously, and whether it's the communities themselves committing the crimes on the pipelines, I don't think is always the fair assessment. So at the end of the day, why are we putting the responsibility on them? That's just my own personal view. I think obviously there also needs to be some sort of accountability in the communities. I think the important thing is that the PIA does recognize that they need to do more community work. They need to be more engaged in the communities, do more root cause activities, try to get some development plans going in the region. And that has always been the sort of mindset and model that the EU has been wanting to champion in the Niger Delta. As I alluded to in the beginning, in my introduction, the EU has been active in the region since 2008 with what we call the Niger Delta Support Program. And that's been about 250 million euros that we've been using in the area on a wide range of things, community-driven livelihood programs, small-scale infrastructure projects, whether it's boreholes. We've also helped the state and LGA governments with state finance and governance models through the World Bank. Recently, we also had what was called the Niger Delta Dialogue Forum, which was led by several NGOs, traditional leaders, militants, bringing them together, have a safe space to voice some grievances. So we do believe in addressing the sort of underlying root causes aspects, also through community-driven approaches. Whether the PAA gets it right with Chapter 3, I don't think I'm the expert to say, but I do see a risk in terms of putting all of the blame on the communities themselves if there's an act of violence or crime in the region. So yeah, that would be my diplomatic answer. I think just one more aspect, and I think that's also worth flagging, is that we are soon to launch a new study on climate and environmental degradation. So the EU will be funding that. I think that's also an aspect that has been neglected for some time. I don't think we have a full picture, a comprehensive picture of what sort of impact the oil sector has had in the region. And one thing that also Joe mentioned before was sort of the long-term prospects of the oil industry in general. So we talked about this earlier, but the Russia-Ukraine crisis, the EU wanting to do more in the region in terms of particularly gas. We see gas as a transition energy towards a greener energy transition in Europe. And I think the argument has been, if we look at the short, medium, and long term, how viable is Nigeria as a partner? So on the short term, we have a very current security situation in the Niger Delta, particularly around Bonny and Brass pipelines. On the medium term, Joe was talking about this in terms of, we need to put money on the table to develop the assets. And then on the long term, there's also, we need to keep developing and looking for new oil fields and exploring for new fields. And I don't see that happening either, which is I think a concern to me. So I guess I'm a bit concerned on the short, medium, and long term aspects here for the EU to really engage with Nigeria on the gas sector. And let me just put it like this: it's a once in a lifetime opportunity in many ways for Nigeria. It's not every day that they have to make such a huge transition from gas imports from Russia. Yeah, and is Nigeria ready to capitalize on that? I really have my doubts. Anyways, I don't want to be the messenger of doom either.
Excellent. That's fine. That's fine. At least we have an idea where solutions can come from. Joe, I'm again looking at some of the questions. Somebody directed this question to you. I don't know why most of the questions are going to you and Thomas, and some going to Sam, but Sam has left. But the one that popped in now, it's basically saying that we've not addressed the underlying cause as to why people are breaking up pipelines and stealing the crude. And he also mentioned that it is not only the crude itself, even refined products are being stolen. So both upstream and midstream and downstream that it is happening. And he attributes it mostly to underdevelopment in the region. In other words, there hasn't been substantial amount of funding going in for development in the region. And therefore, people are justified by taking their resources. You use the term, our resources.
Man, you know my view on this, right? There is no part of Nigeria that is developed. So let's get the issues in the right perspective. And I hold the view that even if you were to go back to what we had pre-Civil War, the Constitution, 1963 Constitution, and look at what we had then and what we have now, is not fundamentally different. I actually think what we have now is probably more favorable to the producing communities than what we had then. Now, what has happened really is that rather than give this directly, we had created these artificial entities called states, and we are passing the benefits through these entities that are largely unaccountable. And I've said this repeatedly. We worked on this over the last 3-4 years, and I've shared the results. The quantum of money that has gone into is huge. It's massive. It could have significantly developed the Niger Delta. It didn't because we passed them through these so-called states. So it's an agency problem. I give somebody money to give to you, and the person disappears with it. So you hold me responsible because I'm still owing you. So let's leave that issue. What we need to be discussing, and I do not buy the argument that people are stealing refined products and crude because there's underdevelopment. No, I think people are stealing because they are thieves. Okay, I think it's not. I cannot explain this through any other than the fact that criminals exist everywhere in the world, right? There are criminals outside Nigeria, there are criminals in Nigeria, and people, anybody that steals is a thief. There's no other word for it. Okay, so let's get that through the window. So what we need to now say is, what should we do? Because in normal societies, when somebody is stealing and a third party sees somebody stealing, he reports him. That is the issue that when we were writing the PIB at the time, there was that I pushed for what we call incentive for responsible hosting. It was all mangled up in the final draft, right? Because what Thomas was referring to, whether we should hold them responsible or not, the 2.5% was not to be tied to whether there is sabotage or not. The initial concept was that a certain benefit, at the point we were proposing an additional 1%, should be for responsible, give them an incentive to say, if there is no problem in this, your zone, you get something more. That was but I think it was the way how this process was very long-winded. So a lot of things got missing along the line. So the way it's written today is problematic. And I imagine that they will clarify that using a regulation, because it's almost like the 2.5%, if somebody comes and breaks the pipeline in your community, you will lose it. That's the way it's couched today. I think there are issues with that we cannot hold the communities responsible. They don't have a duty to protect the pipeline. That's the truth. However, we need to recognize that they are the best line of defense for us. And how we handle them will determine whether they will pay attention to what's happening to those infrastructure in their neighborhood. So I needed to clarify that. But as to the question that was raised, people do not steal crude because they feel that they've been shortchanged. I don't think so. I think people steal because they're thieves.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Andu wants to come up and make a comment. He's been watching us from somewhere remotely. So no, you can. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Joe, and thank you, Thomas. Incidentally, I'm a social scientist, so I will start by first disagreeing with Joe's argument that people steal because they are thieves. I will come from what we call the moral economy, which for everyone who steals oil in the Niger Delta, he will have a moral economy to say why he's stealing it. Now, remember, if we look at Paul Collier's argument about greed grievance, when this started, it was about grievance. It moved to greed, now the criminality we are seeing. Now, even if you move to the argument about the PIB, why would I trust the Nigerian state that when it comes to giving us the money that they will give us? So the people might be saying, okay, if we decide to protect the pipeline, when it gets to the end, some people will pocket the money. So why don't I take my own now, knowing that it will not come to me? So if we look at Claude Ake's argument about the regularity of law of exchange, where he talks about political stability, people react based on how the state treats them. So the people of Niger Delta are reacting to how the Nigerian state treats them. The people of Niger Delta are reacting to how the political class treats them. Everyone that steals oil there in any community has a moral economy to why he wants to do that. And that is my argument. I remember that my PhD is around the oil theft, the oil conflict. I went there, I saw what happened, and each time I hear this, yes, I'm a Nigerian, yes, I understand the whole thing, but I tend to ask the question, have we done enough to tell the people why they shouldn't steal it? Have we done enough to convince the people why they shouldn't steal it? Have we done enough as a state to give back to the people all they've lost? So maybe we have to start from there. It's a moral issue. And that moral issue, if we don't deal with it, this will continue to happen. It will continue to happen. This has to, incidentally, the issue of natural resources, conflict, and theft is the same all over the world. And I think we've made that point here. So first, as a people, first as a state, we have to do our own part. Now, it's equally important for us to understand that the people are not idiots. They know that the state is weak. The state is fighting wars in all fronts. They know that they can, let me tell you, if they decide to fund an army in the Niger Delta, they can take on the Nigerian army now because we are at our lowest blow. They understand that. It's equally important for us to understand that this has equally part of what is happening in Ukraine. The people who are fueling them, telling them bring out the oil, knows that with the war in Russia and Ukraine going on, of course, the international criminals know that Nigeria has a porous border, has a porous security. So there are a lot of issues going on. And I think as we are doing this, I hope that there are people watching it from security agents are watching it. In as much as this has security issues, it has other issues that we need to deal with. I think I'm here. Let's continue the debate, and this is good, and I think we're learning a lot as well.
Okay, thank you, Ndo. I will let Joe respond to some of the issues you highlighted. Again, looking at some of the comments, there are a large number of people who agree with Joe that people steal because they want to steal. And a thief will always be a thief if the opportunity presents itself. Joe, he raised a whole lot of issues. And one of them is in terms of, yeah. You want to take that up?
Yes, I agree with him that the state is missing. And, I had said that. I said the state is absent. I've said this a while ago.
Yes.
So, and I agree that the state is weak at this point. Yeah, I mean, I'm just a bloody engineer, but I can tell you that I sincerely believe that those who are stealing, and we can look at it. There's no evidence that it is only Niger Deltas that are stealing crude. Exactly. So there are people from. It's an industry. So his argument about grief would have held for me if it's only Niger Deltas that are involved. So here I'm talking of there are thieves from all across, including foreigners. Okay, in this trade, that is the truth. So what should we do? Like I said, I think 3 levels. Engagement is key. Boots on the ground. You will ask me, oh, has there not been boots on? There has been boots on the ground has been compromised, but it has to now be augmented by technology. That's where the technology bit comes in. To me, a combination of all 3 is what you need, at least to stem the tide. It's going to be a long walk to the point where we will restore investor confidence. It's going to be. However, somebody needs to start doing something. It's not just sufficient to talk about it. I think we need to look at and I say this, I hope that we implement the PIA as, in spite of its flaws, that we just quickly go ahead and start addressing the host community issues. It's important that we do that, okay? But I am not one to say that those who are committing crimes today, I'm going to explain it away because people are aggrieved. No, I don't think that would be proper. I think that we need to be able to, look at issues dispassionately and say, look, if you look at the money that has gone into the Delta, whether it's the derivation, 13% to the states. I've shown you a graph at some point. I remember in Owerri, where I showed a chart.
Yeah, you did so.
You cannot, Charles, if you look at the numbers, this argument, you can't hold these views. That they are aggrieved, yeah. They are aggrieved for the most part, because I have compared what they would have earned if we retained the 1963 Constitution and what they're earning now. And I'm saying that what they're earning now is better than what they would have earned under the 63 Constitution. I've done that analysis. So let's leave that issue. I think people need to start interrogating some of these positions we hold. That way we'll come back and say, well, maybe we have an economic issue, yeah, and we have an economic issue across the country. There's unemployment everywhere. There's criminality going on everywhere across board. So we need to start looking at how do we solve them. We have to provide jobs. We will not provide jobs if people continue to steal oil. The investors will go away. It will simply mean less jobs, right? We will not provide jobs if we continue to, devastate the environment. That is not the road to El Dorado. It's not going to work. So if what is going on now continues, we will have fewer and fewer jobs than we currently have. That's the fact. So the solution is to fix this and get us back. Like I said, the key pillar of the PIA is that we are going to do everything possible to attract needed investment in the sector. And I've said this before. Current reserves, proven reserve, 37 billion of oil. At 2 million a year, a day you're going to need something like almost 50-something years to deplete it, right? We don't have that. I'm just trying to underscore the need for investment, right? If we say that, and what we call RP ratio, it's the quantity of your reserve divided by your rates. We don't have 57 years to deplete our proven reserve today. Now, remember, the proven reserve today is not a static number. It means that we could grow the reserves as well, right? And I'm saying that our current output level is too low for our population, is too low for our proven reserve. Even for gas, it's much, much lower. You're going to need like 70-something years to currently deplete our current proven gas reserves. So you have to see the need for investment. And I'm saying this signal, this whole issue of oil theft is the wrongest signal to send to the investment community at this point.
Thank you, Joe. I think you made a very good point there. And I was about to tell MD that I am aggrieved. Because I'm aggrieved, all of us are aggrieved. We can then democratize theft. Everybody will just go and start stealing there. And then what you are basically calling for is a resource war in the Niger Delta. But then let me go to Thomas. I think Thomas has something to say.
Yeah, I think just jumping in on that question about whether thieves or just ordinary citizens conducting these sort of attacks, I think it's worth examining a bit the structure of the groups that are, perpetrating these sort of things. And I think it's very important to divide, looking at the structure of the criminal enterprises conducting oil theft and bunkering. Obviously, I think we tend to think of oil bunkering and illegal refinery as this small artisanal thing. But if you go and look at an illegal refinery, it's a huge operation. It's not just conducted by a few rotten apples. And it also requires a lot of investment to set up shop and, carry out these activities. So I think it's important to recognize that there are some really hardened illicit criminal actors in the Niger Delta, whether it's around the cult groups or whether it's stemming from Edo State or in the region in general. And these are real criminal groups that need to be dealt with from a law enforcement perspective, in my view. But they obviously can't do things alone. They need to recruit a lot of manpower to, let's say, refine the oil or have the barges that sail out. And I think the manpower of these illicit groups are just ordinary citizens from the communities. And a fisherman might have gone out and caught a fish per day, but probably because of the current security situation or the oil and environmental degradation in the Niger Delta, he's probably looking for other opportunities. And maybe something like oil bunkering and refinery might be another good, easy investment for him. I think that's also what we see in many other parts of the country, whether it's opium farmers in Afghanistan, or whether it's coca farmers in Bolivia and Peru. Ordinary citizens that at the end of the day end up carrying out illegal activities because they don't have the other means to do something legitimate that they might have wanted to do in the end. So I completely agree on the need to, create jobs, investments in the Niger Delta. There used to be a booming fishing sector as well in Nigeria. Where's that today? And obviously you have a downward spiral, evil circle, or whatever you might want to call it, that the security situation also makes it more difficult for these people to do legitimate things, and vice versa. You have these push and pull factors. But I think I also agree that maybe it's not a question about money. We have a Niger Delta ministry, we have a commission, we have how many committees, presidential amnesty program. Yeah. I mean, there's been invested quite a lot from the government also in terms of trying to address some of these livelihood issues in the region. And why it hasn't carried through, I think, is the difficult question to answer. So,
okay, yeah. Thanks, Thomas. Touching on some of the issues, there are nations, there are countries you go, and what is stunning is our failure as a state to protect what we know as our strategic resources. That's one major thing. In some countries, like take for instance in South Africa, if you are caught with diamond, you are ending up with 10 years or 20 years imprisonment. Okay? In some countries, if you are caught poaching rhinos and cutting off their horn, they are poachers. But then be rest assured, you are spending the next 20 years in jail. In Nigeria, you go, compromise the pipeline, take the crude, sell the crude under any kind of disguise, destroy the environment is polluted, and you get away. The law enforcement does not exist. The ability to punish individuals doing this don't seem to exist. And this is the side that is a bit stunning. And Andy, since you joined on this, I'm wondering from an enforcement perspective and in terms of punishing impunity, how do we address this issue?
Thank you, Charles. I've always made this argument about the principal and agency theory. I've always said that where the principal, that the agent looks at the principal. It's what the principal is doing that the agent wants to copy from. And the people respect the agent because they respect the principal. If I do not respect the Nigerian state, if the Nigerian state does not work for me, I cannot respect the Nigerian police. It means I cannot respect anybody that the Nigerian police has a kind of given a responsibility to carry out on its behalf. So, for instance, if we are saying the defense corps, who the Constitution has given the right to protect the pipelines, are not doing much, how can I even respect the private security companies that have been assigned to do the work of, the defense corps? So that's how it works. In other countries, we find out that because the principal is strong and is carrying out his duty to the best of his ability, every agent that he has given the assignment to do, the people fall in line and respect the agent. Now, what we're seeing is that we're seeing a situation where everything is zigzag, everything is in crossroads, so nothing works. So what we're seeing is that the people on their own have understood that the system is not working. The policing is not working. The security is not working. So nothing is working. So they've in turn around to say, since we are living in a situation where the exchange is not working, so we have to go on and get whatever thing we need to get. Now, for us to start even doing anything, we have to start rebuilding the trust that the people have on the state. We are at the lowest range of trust deficit. Nobody trusts the Nigerian state. Even those in the villa do not even trust Nigeria themselves. I'm sure they are praying let Nigeria not happen to them because they don't trust anybody. Nobody trusts Nigeria. I'm telling you, if we trust Nigeria, why are we running abroad to go and do medicals and all that? It means that we cannot even go to a Nigerian hospital and check in and say, take care of me. So whatever thing we're doing, let's start looking at it from the issue of the trust. We need to start rebuilding the trust in these communities. Let the people start trusting the state. And it's by them trusting the state that somebody will say, okay, so are you telling us that if we protect the pipelines, that at the end of the year, that this amount will come to our community? The state will say yes. And they will say, you will not give this money to Mr. A because he's a member of your party. The state will say B. And if the state is able to, in turn, do what the states have said they will do. So the people will now reciprocate by making sure that they protect the pipelines. So it's a big issue. And it's even like what we're seeing in the security sector, in the article NESA SPD released yesterday, where we're looking at local engagement in Kaduna State. It's the same thing. Local engagement have to come in here. The people, you have to start rebuilding the trust. It's the same local engagement that will make a local person to run to a member of security agent to say, I've seen a truck drive into our community, and I think they're going towards the pipelines. They need to trust the state. And that's when local intelligence will start working. That's where all these things will work. Like Joe said, we have billion of work to do. And we have to start doing it by being very sincere with the people so that the people can start trusting the state. And that's where we start rebuilding all these things. It's not mechanical, it has to grow. If we build the trust, intelligence will come. The people will in turn start protecting the pipelines. They will not start moving from grid back to grievance, and you can able to clear out the grievance. But for now, everybody wants to steal because nobody trusts anybody, including the Nigerian state.
Okay, Andy, somebody just said an interesting thing. You know, we have close to about between 90 and 95 people who logged in for this, more if not more than that. And all kinds of questions are popping up, which shows that it's an interesting topic. Some of them even suggesting that we'll repeat this and keep on hammering on it so that the government and all the policymakers will listen. It's a very funny one. It says I should tell you that building trust will take 1,000 years. So where do we start from that? That's a comment from one of the participants. But yes, you should build trust. But the key thing is, what do we do within the short term and the medium term and long term? That building trust is a process and it is transition. But let me take up an issue that came up again. Joe, you may look at this. Maybe Andy, you come in. The argument this guy put up here is that the contracts for the protection of pipelines are awarded to people outside the region. In other words, non-Niger Delta people are given that responsibility, and in most cases, they have people from other parts of the country awarded such contracts. So he said, why should you award contracts to somebody to come and protect a pipeline that traverses through our ancestral land and all those kind of issues? I know these are some of the things the PIA is trying to address, but then Joe, should that be a justification for the kind of plundering we are seeing?
Simple answer is no. I think it's not. I think that, you see, this is the problem. We play politics with everything in this country. Yeah. I mean, all of that pipeline contract, they were all politically motivated. You saw, especially under the prior government, right? You saw how parties were settled with pipeline protection, right? Contracts. I think we need to step back a bit. Dr. Andy, you're right. We need to build trust. But that's more like medium to long term. In the near term, we need to stop the bleeding, right? So what should we do immediately? I think we need to engage. Somebody needs to get out there. Somebody who has significant enough role in the government of the day needs to go out there and engage. That's one. Two, I think we need to implement and show that we're implementing the PIA. This idea, as we speak, the law says that host community trust should be set up within 12 months from the signing of the act, right? I do not know that anybody has done that. So these are some of the issues. So 12 months from August will be when? You know, September, or it's almost here. And there's not a lot of activities around that. So we need to do that. We need to get, and to do that, you need, the regulations need to come out, the parties, the companies need to engage lawyers and set up the trust and engage the communities, because there's quite a lot of stakeholder engagement towards getting that done. That will help. If all of that were going on now, right, you will have a basis to start demanding for better conduct from those host communities. So I think we need to, like yesterday, get going along these lines. And lastly, we need to look at our security forces. I mean, Doc talked about, the theories. I'm not this, but I understand one thing. I understand that Nigeria is under policed in every sense of that word. So if we think that given our security challenges, that these 300,000 odd policemen and maybe a third of that of army will police the Nigerian state, then we must be kidding ourselves. We need like 3 times our current manpower. But again, we don't have one. We can't even pay the existing one. So when I say we become a hugely unproductive state, that's what I mean. You have combined maybe 500,000 men in uniform in Nigeria, and we can't pay them decent wages. But we need like twice that number to come close to the ratio of policing that you need for a state as ours, right? So these are the real issues. And I'm not suggesting that it is boots on the ground that will solve the problem on its own, but it is important because that's how the state expresses its presence, right? The state must show that I am here, right? And how do you do it? Men in uniform. We do not have enough men in uniform anywhere in this country, whether it's police, army, air force, we just don't have it. So we need to start rethinking policing. I sincerely think that if we, and people have talked about state police and all that, and I raise my hand and say, those are not issues for the industry to deal with. But we need, it is not the duty of the companies to provide security. The companies simply need an environment where they can carry on their business, produce oil and sell it. So the Nigerian state again has to get involved and say, look, we need to provide an environment that allows business to thrive. That is very important. So in the near term or immediate term, I think those 3 levels, somebody needs to work. I hear the Minister of State and a few big shots have gone to the Delta and all that. So we need to see what the level of engagement and what comes out of it. And I hope that somebody takes it as his day job to do, because one thing that happens with government is that after all that razzmatazz, the cameras are off, everybody goes to bed. This problem will not go away until it is worked.
Okay, excellent. I'm looking at some of the questions coming up and laying out some of the issues. I think some of them are repeating some of the things you said that has been said by other people. The key thing here is we have an industry that is bleeding. You look at the issues of an investor comes in, invest, in an oil well works hard, put in resources, and it doesn't take it. Sometimes some of these things took years to work, hard work, and huge amount of resources pumped in, and it pumps the whole thing through the pipes and hoping to get it to the export terminal and export, only to find out of the 120 barrels, he's only getting 10,000 barrels. That can be very, very discouraging. That can be very, very discouraging. And I don't see an investor who will want to come in that kind of environment and put in resources. One of you can hear Tony Edumelu, for instance, I'm sorry to mention names, crying out after pumping in huge amount of money, and he's a Nigerian, and getting that kind of result. And you can also see a shift from some of the existing oil companies moving offshore and running away. Very comfortable to have the fishes as members of their community, as opposed to staying onshore where they are dealing with the communities. Now, the transition and the changes that are happening in the oil and gas sector in Nigeria will pose a huge threat and a huge challenge unless this particular issue is addressed. Whether it is driven by greed, whether it is driven by grievances, it's an issue that needs to be identified. And if some of us look back into the history, I would think it was greed first before grievances. Oil bunkering started off earlier before militancy issues started coming up. And if you look at the substantial amount of money that has gone into the region through NDDC, through direct allocations from the federal government, through amnesty process, through Ministry of Niger Delta, and other organizations that have, like foundations that have been set up by the oil companies, plus their corporate social responsibility initiatives, you start wondering whether is it a resource issue or issue that has to do with a failed capacity of state to enforce law and order in the region, or is it an issue that has come up with a whole lot of industry, like somebody put out here, an underground industry that is built on theft and nothing more. So it's something I think we need to really look into and see. And Thomas made a very good point when he raised the issue of how do we map out, do a very strong mapping of the profiles of the people involved in this process, and that way we will be able to tease out what some of the challenges are and how that can be addressed. But I don't know, we're almost running closing time. Some people are saying the time is too short, we should do another round of it. But I would like to see each and every one of you make your comment in terms of what you think, so a summary of the whole thing before I now begin to close down. Starting with Thomas, if you're comfortable.
Yeah, thanks. I was just about to comment on that as well. Just before I do so, just to comment on the boots on the ground aspect. I don't know if I see it as a problem of manpower of security forces in the region. We have the Joint Task Force. We have the Dakatarda Barawo, I think I'm pronouncing it wrong, the big military operation. But I also had a conversation with one of the IOCs the other day, and they actually employ almost 2,500 security guards. I mean, that's a sizable army they have. So I don't know. In any case, I think just to sum up, maybe it's relevant talking a bit about the response side of things. What should we be doing? And I think you can divide it into three sort of categories. And three levels of complexity, I think also. So short, medium, and long term. And there's obviously three levels of complexity to that. So in the short term, I think that's what everyone is focusing on these days is, for instance, the joint military operation between the Army and the Navy in the region at the moment. They're using about 40 warships, gunboats, helicopters, joint operations, clearing out illegal refineries. I think also this issue of technology on the pipelines falls into that category of trying to secure the pipelines. That's obviously also a short-term solution. And I think we're focusing a bit too much on that aspect as we're speaking right now. I see some of the medium-term answers is, for instance, a more law enforcement aspect in terms of, identifying who are the financiers of these activities, who are the men behind sort of these activities. Not so much the community people operating the barges or working at the oil refineries, but the guys who are financing the operations themselves. I think there are obviously some sort of big fish involved in criminal activities, probably stemming from the region. What are we doing in that regard? I have to question, because if we look at the response towards the war on drugs, whether it's in South America or whether it was piracy in the Horn of Africa, those were some of the key successes. Was gathering intelligence on the key individuals and then, for lack of a better term, but cutting off the head of the snake. And then obviously there's the more long-term aspects, which we've been talking about today as well. And that's obviously the most complex, and that is regarding, addressing root causes, providing livelihoods and alternatives for the community members, developing the Niger Delta region. We also talked a bit about, there's been a lot of investment in the region. Where has it gone? Environmental degradation, climate change. These are really the key issues we should be discussing, and they're obviously the most difficult and the hardest to address. But I think we should insist on having a focus on them, because at the end of the day, if we keep having short-term solutions, we will have this ballooning effect that I talked about earlier, where we quell one security challenge, but another one pops up. And that has been the trend in the Niger Delta for far too long, I would say, is that you have different phases of insurgency, militancy, piracy, oil theft, bunkering. And if we don't, address the long-term aspects, then I think we're just going to be talking about a different subject in 8 months in the same panel. Then it might be, insurgency or whatever it might be. So I think that's the ball we need to keep our eyes on, but obviously also the most difficult of them all. So yeah, that'll be my sum up. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Joe. What's your shorting?
Well, I align myself with what Tom has said. Somebody needs to sit down and work all the items, whether they are near term, medium, or long term. But again, we shouldn't lose sight of the issue of international collaboration. So if you think about whether it's Brazil, whether it's Mexico, whether it's Nigeria, it's happening. It's all over. Group theft is not a Nigerian, it's not a uniquely Nigerian phenomenon. It's happening, and there are solutions that has been applied. But I think that the international is getting to a point where I believe the international community needs to get together and build a consensus and an arrangement that will make, because if somebody steals the crude here and cannot sell it easily, that is the biggest disincentive to stealing it in the first place, right? So we need some international push in that regards, whether it's something similar to the Kimberley process, whether it's just simply fingerprinting every crude, what we call the crude assay, get crude assay for each export grade, so that anywhere bonylite is seen, we know it's bonylite. It's not going to be difficult to identify, right? So there are technologies for things like that. The important thing is, for me, is that this is a serious issue. It needs to be worked like yesterday, and I hope that, and there are solutions. So it's not like we are all helpless. So we just need to get the responsible parties to start doing the work that is necessary.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Andy.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I think just like Thomas said, boots on the ground. My thinking is I'm thinking, Mr. Chodo, next year should be supporting a meeting of stakeholders, which should be happening like yesterday. We should look at gathering all the stakeholders who are concerned about this, development partners, Niger Delta states, the security agents, the Niger Delta Ministry, and the oil companies. I think this should be happening immediately, where we can brainstorm on the best way to go. Why this is happening alongside, I think, someone like you, Mr. Chodo, you have, I think you have your way around the ministry. There should be messaging going out now. They should be investing in social media messaging and other forms of media messaging around the implication, because some people may not really understand how much this thing is costing the state and how much it's costing them indirectly. But for them, it's a direct benefit that they want to get. They are looking at, if the state is not giving me, so whatever thing I'm getting, but they are not thinking about the hospitals they can't get, the roads they can't get. I think the state should be invested in that. And why this is going on? Thomas is here. Thomas, I think the EU can be looking at funding maybe another research on mapping the levels of involvement. And I hear you talk about that. It should be an area we should be interested in. What are the levels of involvement? You know, because some people are involved at the high level, while some women are just being there to get whatever thing that is left out of the one that have been stolen. So a research that looks at the level of involvement will help us to know how to deal with this, so that we don't just theorize without knowing I know that some of us have the practical experience, but this thing move in stages and it deepens by the day. Probably what is being used 2 years ago and the level of people involved 2 years ago is not still the same today, because I think they are changing in dynamics, they are changing in strategy. So it might be something that we might be looking at. And then my another thinking is, how do we start talking with the local communities and the traditional leaders in these communities? How soon can we start having a town hall meetings that involve them? But I don't think this thing should be led by the state, because somehow they don't trust the state. So probably if we get people who they trust, maybe the oil companies, if they trust them, will be involved in this kind of town hall meetings. Probably the NGO should be involved, probably the development partners. Maybe the state can stay at the back, because people have really lost trust in them. They can provide the enabling environment, but stay at the back. So let's see whether we can start talking to the people, and maybe we can start rebuilding the whole thing again. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. It's been a very fruitful discussion, and there are several questions that came up. Some of them I do want us to touch. Some are very controversial. Some are outright allegations. But what it shows, it's many Nigerians are really, really concerned with this particular phenomenon, and they believe that we should find answers to them as quickly as possible. Some of them suggested, for instance, get the engagement processes that are essential. The mapping of the stakeholders involved is critical. The deployment of technology immediately is essential. The idea of getting boots on the ground is also there. Somebody was saying, if we have park rangers, why can't we have a specific agency dedicated for that, with technology and all these things deployed for that particular purpose? So you have the communities as the first front line, you have the technology itself, then you deploy this expertise or the law enforcement agencies when needed. So they're also making all kinds of suggestions on the basis of some of the comments that they have had. But the general impression is that, yes, Nigeria has a problem. Yes, it's clear that the state is absent, that there is weak institutions involved, that the capacity to deal with this is lacking. there is the need for us to look at our processes in terms of issues that has to do with accountability. They also highlighted the need to ensure that those caught are punished. In other words, that we let impunity go, and we know all these people that are involved in doing all these things. They also feel that agencies that are running our oil and gas industry, those heading them are not held accountable to minimum performance standards. And some of them mentioned certain things about ministers and heads of NNPC and all sorts of things. But the general impression is that this is a critical issue. We must address it as quickly as possible. The capacity can be mobilized. The technology can be procured, regardless of whether we have the money or we don't, that we're already spending a lot to do so. So, and they made all kinds of a series of recommendations and suggestions. And I'm quite impressed. The feedback here, I'm quite impressed with the candid expressions of views by all the panelists and some of the critical recommendations that has been made. And hopefully we will take up this particular edition next time. We will be looking at it in a more deeper form, especially relating to the way forward. And at the same time, deal with some of the specific recommendations. There are a whole lot of policy recommendations being written out by members behind the scene, and that will be shared at the end of this program and probably published so that it will inform policymakers and other stakeholders in terms of how to deal with this obnoxious experience Nigeria is having in the petroleum industry. We cannot have our national strategic resources being stolen and being plundered. We cannot. The nation is bleeding. The nation is bleeding. And if it is allowed to continue, then we can as well democratize stealing and theft. That's what somebody posted here. And let everybody go in there and be doing the same thing. Then let's see where it takes not only the Nigerian state, but also those who claim that they are aggrieved. Because at the end of the day, it is their environment that will be destroyed. It is their biodiversity that will be destroyed. It is their riverine and the aqua systems that will be destroyed. And it is the environment that will be destroyed. So if you turn it into an ungovernable area, not only because of the conflict that it may generate, but also because of the nightmarish environmental challenges that it will create with all the diseases and ill health, with all the other things that will follow with it, loss of livelihood support systems. You cannot fish, you cannot practice agriculture. Then let's see where we head to. So many people, most of the feedbacks are basically highlighting that the necessity to address this thing is now, the urgency is now. So I'll say thank you to all of you and see you some other time. Thank you, Thomas, for having time. I know you are very busy. We've taken 2 hours of your day. Thank you, Joe, for participating. And thanks for coming in, and thanks to Sam. And see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for organizing, Charles. It was very great. Thanks. Stay in touch.
Thanks, Charles. And thanks, colleagues. Yep.
Okay. And thank you, Ndu and Joe as well.
Thank you, Thomas. And thank you, Joe.
Thanks so much, bro.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.